In this video, we're going to solve slightly more complex literal equations. So we're going to solve for a specific variable. Okay, in the first one, we're going to solve for x. So to get x on one side of the equal sign all by itself, we're always going to want to move everything else to the other side. So we have a 2 being multiplied by x, and we have this minus 5. So you have to get rid of whatever is by itself. Think of opposite order of operations. So we're going to get rid of what's subtracted on first because this minus 5 is all by itself. Opposite of minus 5 to get it to go to the other side of the equal sign is plus 5. And anything we do to one side, we must do to the other. So negative 5 plus 5 is 0. We can't combine y and 5. So it's just going to stay as y plus 5 on the left side. Equals, we're left with 2x. Okay, so remember, anytime you have a number multiplied by a variable, they're right next to each other. So this means 2 times x. So to get x by itself, we're going to do the opposite operation. Because it's currently being multiplied by 2, to get that 2 to go away, we're going to divide by 2. But anything we do to one side, we must do to the other. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we're left with, I'm going to write it over here. I'm just going to reverse the order. So x equals, on this side we have y plus 5 over 2. And that is our final answer. Okay, so that one wasn't too bad. On this one, we have q equals r plus s divided by 2. So in the first one I said do opposite order of operations, but you have to think on this one, you have the entire top part. I can put that top in parentheses because that entire top part is being divided by 2. So here I would have to get rid of that divided by 2 first before I can get r all by itself. Opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2. And anything you do to one side, do to the other. So we have 2 divided by 2 is 1. Over here, 2 times q. Remember, when you're multiplying a number times a variable, you're just going to put the number in front of the variable. So it's going to be written as 2q equals r plus s. Okay? And to get r by itself, we have s added on, so we're going to do the opposite, which is minus s to both sides. S minus s is 0. And we cannot combine our 2q and s, so it's just going to be left as 2q minus s. Minus s is equal to r. If you want to reverse it, you can. So you have r equals 2q minus s, but it really doesn't matter. It means the same thing. All right, this one's, again, a little more complex than the previous ones. Okay, we want to get y all by itself. All right, the whole parenthesis here is being multiplied by 1/2. So we have to get rid of that 1/2 before we can do anything with the variables inside of the parentheses. Okay, so because 1/2 is multiplied by the parenthesis, opposite is to divide by 1/2. But when we would divide by a fraction, we do keep it, change it, flip it. We keep the first fraction the same, change division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction over, which is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal, or the fraction flipped over, 2 over 1. 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So these actually cancel each other out. And we're left with 1 times y minus x, which whenever you multiply anything by 1, it's just itself. So that's how we were left with y minus x. Okay? We have z times 2 over 1, but 2 over 1 is just 2. Since I don't have a fraction here, I'm going to ignore the one on bottom. We have z times 2. Remember, when you're writing a variable multiplied by a number, you always put the number in front. So you write this as 2z. And I'm just going to put a little line through the z so you don't get my 2 and my z confused. All right, we're almost done. We almost have y by itself, but we have this minus x on the same side as y. Because it's minus, the opposite operation is plus. So we're going to add x to both sides of this equal sign. X minus x is 0, so I'm left with y is equal to, I have 2z plus x. They're not like terms, so I can't combine them. So I'm just going to leave it as 2z plus x. And that is my answer. All right. Here's another one with a fraction. Those tend to be the more difficult ones. We want s by itself. Okay. Currently, s is being multiplied by 2/3. Well, negative 2/3, because remember you have to keep the operation in front of the term with it. And you have this r here also. So I'm going to get rid of the r first. Okay. Because we have r minus 2/3 s, I can get rid of it by doing my addition or subtraction. So I have to look at it. It is a positive r. Opposite of positive r is negative. So I'm going to subtract r from both sides to make it go away. R minus r is 0. Don't forget that minus stays in front of the 2/3 s, and so it's now written negative 2/3 s equals 2t minus r. I cannot combine these because t and r, they're different. So you just leave it as 2t minus r. All right, so here's where it gets a little tricky. We have negative 2/3 multiplied by s. Okay, remember to get rid of a fraction that's multiplied by your variable, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal, the fraction flipped over. But we also have a negative here, and we have to get rid of that negative because your variable cannot be negative. So we're going to multiply by negative 3/2. And this whole thing, negative 3/2. So the negative 3/2 is multiplied by this entire side, which is why I put it inside parentheses. Okay, so negative 3/2 times negative 2/3 equals 1. I'm going to just show you over here so you can see how they cancel each other out. So we have negative 3/2 times negative 2/3. Remember when you have fractions and you're multiplying, you just multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So I'm going to say negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, over 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 over 6 equals 1. So I'm left with, these cancel each other out, 1s, which is just s. Equals, okay? To simplify this, I would actually take that number, negative 2/3, that is multiplied by everything inside the parenthesis and distribute it, and that would be reducing it. So 2t times negative 3/2. Okay, this one's a little tricky. I'm going to write it over here. 2t times negative 3/2. I'm going to put 2t over 1. So I have 2t times negative 3. Well, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, t on top. 1 times 2 is 2. But I can reduce this because negative 6 over 2, or negative 6 divided by 2, is negative 3. So that leaves me with negative 3t. So 2t times negative 3/2 is negative 3t. Here, when I multiply negative 3/2 times this minus r, a negative times a negative is a positive, and 3/2 times r is just 3/2 r. Remember, anytime you have a number multiplied by a variable, you just stick them together with the number right in front. Okay. So that is what s equals. That one was a little more complex. We had to do quite a few more things. All right, the last one that I'm going to show you is even more confusing. So on this one, we want to solve for x, but we have x's on both sides, and well, this one's being multiplied by 2, this one's being multiplied by w. So we can't get rid of what it's multiplied by to start with. We're going to start by just getting the terms with x on the same side and the terms without x on the other side. and then we'll see what we can do to it. All right, so I'm going to leave my x terms over here, meaning I want to get this xw over here with it. So it's a positive xw, so I'm going to subtract xw from both sides. Xw minus xw is 0. So over here I have 2x minus y minus xw equals negative v. All right, I want my y term to go over here. It doesn't have an x in it, so let's move that. It's a negative y, opposite, positive, so add y to both sides. Negative y plus y is 0. So bring down that 2x minus xw equals negative v plus y. All right, here's the tricky part. Okay, we're basically going to do opposite of distributing. We're going to factor something out. Remember when we distribute, we have a number that's on the outside that we distribute through and multiply by everything. So we're going to see if there's something that we can divide by or take out that both of these have to the outside. Well, they both have an x term, so I'm going to take it out. I factored it out. And I'm left with, remember when we're distributing, we do x times the first term to get this. So x times what would give us 2x? Well, x times 2. Bring down that minus. X times what gives us x times w? Well, w. Okay. So if I can always recheck myself. If I redistribute, x times 2 is 2x minus x times w is xw. I should be able to redistribute and get this back to the same answer. So that's just factoring out my x equals negative v plus y. All right, because x is being multiplied by this whole parenthesis, 2 minus w. Opposite would be to divide by 2 minus w. But anything you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So 2 minus w divided by 2 minus w is 1. So we're left with x is equal to negative v plus y over 2 minus w. And I can remove the parenthesis because there's nothing else on bottom with it. All right, so that one was probably the most confusing out of all of those. I'm going to give you some to go ahead and try. They're very similar to the ones I just did with you. Zoom out. Another one. Okay, so there's one you can't see. So go ahead and you're going to solve for y, s, x, p, w, and the w one's down here. So go ahead and pause it, come back for the answers when you're ready. All right, so we're going to go through these together. Make sure you understood how to do them. I'm going to zoom back in so you can see what I'm doing. All right, first one, we're going to solve for y. Have to get rid of the x, it's positive x, so opposite is minus x. X minus x is 0, so we're left with negative 3y equals 2 minus x. Remember, we can't combine them, so it just stays as 2 minus x. All right, we want y by itself, it's being multiplied by negative 3. Opposite is to divide by negative 3 because we have to get rid of that negative also. Anything you do to one side, do to the other. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. So y equals 2 minus x over negative 3. All right, then solve for s. Okay, this one, we have to get rid of, the whole top is being divided by 4. Opposite is to multiply by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 4 times negative 5r. 4 times negative 5 is negative 20r equals s minus q. Okay, to get s by itself, get rid of the minus q by adding q to both sides. Negative q plus q is 0. So we're left with s is equal to negative 20r plus q. Remember, you can't combine those two because they're not like terms. One's an r, one's a q. All right, now we're solving for x. Okay, let's get rid of this. The whole parenthesis is multiplied by 1/3 because we want to work with what's inside the parenthesis. We want to get that x by itself, so we have to get rid of what's on the outside first by multiplying both sides by the reciprocal, 3/1. Okay, so 3 times 1 is 3, 1 times 3 is 3, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. And if we have 1 times x plus 5z, it's just x plus 5z. Over here, 3 times y is 3y equals x plus 5z. And to get x by itself, we're going to subtract 5z from both sides. 5z minus 5z is 0. And x is equal to 3y minus 5z. Again, you cannot combine. They are not like terms. All right, solving for p. This one we have to get the terms with p to the same side. You get them both on the left. Honestly, you get the same answer if you moved them both to the right. So I'm just going to subtract 5p from both sides. So my two terms with p are together. 5p minus 5p is 0. So I'm left with r plus sp minus 5p equals q. I have to get rid of this r because it doesn't have a p with it. So I'm going to subtract r from both sides. r minus r is 0. So sp minus 5p equals q minus r. All right, here's where I factor out that p. And what am I left with? Once I got rid of the p there, I'm left with s minus, when I took that p away, I'm left with a 5 equals q minus r. All right. P is being multiplied by s minus 5. So we're going to divide by s minus 5 on both sides. S minus 5 divided by s minus 5 is 1. So we're left with s is equal to q minus r over s minus 5. All right, last one. Right, move our w's to the same side. I'm going to move this positive wy by subtracting wy. wy minus wy is 0. Here we have an 8w minus x minus wy equals 16. If you're wondering why we don't combine these terms, they're not truly like terms. They both have w, but one's multiplied by another, by a number. The other's multiplied by y, so they're not like terms. Because these two variables are definitely different than 8 and a w. Okay, so let's move that minus x by adding x to both sides. Negative x plus x is 0. So we're left with 8w minus wy equals 16 plus x, because we can't combine them. All right, now we're going to factor out that w. That's what they both have in them. When we get this w to factor out, we're left with 8, minus, when we took this w away, we're left with y, equals 16 plus x. All right, w is being multiplied by 8 minus y. Opposite, divide by 8 minus y on both sides. 8 minus y divided by 8 minus y is 1. So our answer is w equals 16 plus x over 8 minus y. Hopefully you're able to do the more complex literal equations, especially those last two were pretty tricky where you had to factor out the variable.